Hello, everyone. We are live. This is Peter Hurst from MIT Sloan Executive Education, bringing you a LinkedIn Live event called Frameworks for Startup Success with MIT's Paul Cheek. The clue is in the title of this LinkedIn Live that I am joined today by Paul Cheek from the Martin Trust Center for MIT Entrepreneurship. He describes himself as a serial entrepreneur. And when I was just reminding myself of what startups he's already been involved in really a very high velocity kind of entrepreneurial career before and during his work with us here at MIT, because he still is an entrepreneur in his own right, which I'm sure we'll get into in the course of the next hour or so's conversation. But by way of a slightly more in-depth introduction, Paul is a tech entrepreneur, an entrepreneurship educator, and a software engineer. He's the executive director and entrepreneur in residence at the Martin Trust Center for MIT Entrepreneurship. He's a senior lecturer at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in our Sloan School of Management and the co-founder and CTO of OceanWorks. He was MIT's first, and this, if this is a real job title, I think might be the coolest one I've ever come across. MIT's first hacker in residence, and has since taught, mentored, and advised thousands of entrepreneurs all around the world. Each year, he teaches hundreds of undergrads, graduates, and PhD students, in addition to all the work he does with us in MIT Sloan Executive Education. Teaches the New Enterprises course, which we think is the oldest entrepreneurship course in the country. He's also taught the Advanced Entrepreneurship course, Building an Entrepreneurial Venture, Advanced Tools and Techniques. So everything from basics to super advanced. Works very closely with so many students. He has identified a gap in the entrepreneurship curriculum, designed experimental entrepreneurship education content, and now leads a new advanced course he developed to help current entrepreneurs build their business called Venture Creation Tactics. So I'm sure we'll hear more about all of that in the next 30 to 60 minutes. Outside of all of this education work, Paul is a coach, a mentor to entrepreneurs, including MIT Delta V, which is our startup accelerator, the MIT Fuse Accelerator, our Sandbox Innovation Fund, and a bunch of other workshops and hackathons, one of which was the MIT COVID-19 Challenge. So he might tell us a little about that. And he built our amazing entrepreneurial platform at the Sloan School and MIT called Orbit, which serves, I think, tens of thousands of our MIT community annually with not just content, but engagement around entrepreneurship. I mentioned his own entrepreneurial endeavors. His current one is the co-founder and CTO of OceanWorks, which has a mission to end plastic pollution. I look forward to learning more about that, Paul. He's been recognized in 2021 by the Forbes 30 Under 30, and he was named one of 10 standouts who hold the future of clean tech literally in their hands. Prior to that, he co-founded Work Today. He scaled from a startup. I love how he says from zero to 50,000 workers across 16 major markets throughout the United States. And he also had a startup at the age of 21 in global payments, which led him to being hailed as one of the world's next 10 big fintech stars. So, Paul, you are clearly a already prolific entrepreneur and tech entrepreneur in your own right, and really have very quickly become a crucial member of the education and investigation into the phenomena of entrepreneurship community here at MIT and in the Sloan School. So welcome. So pleased that you've been able to find some time out of all of those things that you do. And I'm going to invite everyone who's watching and listening to feel free to put questions, comments in the thread here, so that we can put those to Paul as the event goes on. But Paul, let me just start you off with one which I'm sure is on everybody's minds, given what's been going on over the last several months with a very profoundly impactful tech. And I know that you were the first person I heard about this from, so I know you've been thinking a lot about it. And that is generative AI and the tools that have suddenly become available to all of us. in that field. So, simple question with a maybe not simple answer. How do you think generative AI is changing the game for entrepreneurs?
Wow. Well, Peter, first of all, thank you for having me. Super excited to be here and to be here with you all. You talk about, yes, I love entrepreneurship. I have been an entrepreneur. I still am an entrepreneur. And one of the things that, I don't know, I hope at some point we touch on is the fact that you can be an entrepreneur in any organization. Here now being an entrepreneur at MIT, it's a wonderful place to be. And Hacker in Residence is a real job title. It's amazing. It's amazing that it is. But that's very much so real. And it's a very exciting time for entrepreneurship and for entrepreneurs and for people who are not yet entrepreneurs, but who want to be entrepreneurs. Again, whether that's to go start a new company or to do that in an existing organization, either way. And generative AI is making it so much easier to go build a business. But I do think that the table stakes for entrepreneurship are going to change. What do I mean when I say that? We're looking at generative AI. We're seeing how it's impacting entrepreneurship right now. And it's changing it in a number of ways. First, with the way in which people build business plans. And I'm not necessarily talking about some big 30-page document outlining every element of the business. I'm talking about how people set a plan of the business that they want to build. It's giving people the tools to be able to come up with new business ideas, right? A lot of people who will come into one of our courses or programs like EDP will say, oh, I don't have an idea. And we said, that's okay, right? But surely you've got some ideas kind of percolating up in your head, right? There's some things that you've encountered over the course of your daily life at work or in personal life over the course of the past month that were problems or challenges. Now, all of a sudden, these can come right to the forefront with generative AI. When people think about what market segments to look at, you can go and run market segmentation analyses using generative AI extremely quickly. And I do believe that it will change the way that businesses are planned. I think it will expedite the business planning process, which is really exciting because it will put more people in the position to be able to go out and start a business with a comprehensive business plan. Hopefully, it allows for more disciplined entrepreneurs. And I do think it will change the skills that entrepreneurs need. I think they will need a lot of the same fundamental background knowledge of how to build a business, but I think the business planning process will change dramatically. And I'd also say that actually building the business itself, not just planning out the business, but building it itself is changing as well. I'm seeing people not just come up with great ideas using generative AI, but also people who, are going out and they're crafting their sales emails using generative AI to those first customers. They're building out a scaling strategy for their businesses using generative AI. And many are even using generative AI to write the code for the products that they will export globally, that they will put out to the world, which is really exciting because it's addressing one of the challenges that entrepreneurs have, which is that they have limited resource, limited time, limited money. So their ability to go and get more done with fewer resources is super exciting. And I think that we'll start to see that have a dramatic impact in society around us with new businesses being built and those businesses going out to the world having an impact with traction, right? I think traction will change. Even now, you can't really go, it's difficult to raise a lot of money with an idea. And I think what we'll see is kind of the bar will continue to raise in terms of traction and what people look for when they're evaluating different startups to join or to invest in. And I think that means that this is it's such an exciting time and we're seeing a lot change. Generative AI can certainly be used to go and build a business faster. And I just can't wait to see more and more of that happen.
That's great. I'm sure there's a lot more questions that will come in on this topic as we go along. But, just with a sign of what the pace of change here is, that was a question with maybe a 6-month time horizon, because it's about 6 months since we all started having the ability to use some of those tools. What about, the last month? What's the most interesting thing you've seen happen that's relevant to entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs, even in the last few weeks?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. We've seen a lot of businesses start to incorporate generative AI, but we're also seeing a lot of businesses being built on generative AI, where that truly is the premise, we ran a large generative AI entrepreneurship competition over the course of really the past kind of month and a half, 2 months here at MIT, called Ignite. The idea was, bring people together, form teams, and come up with new business concepts. And one of those businesses, Peter, all of the businesses that applied were fascinating. But there was something that kind of changed the way that I think about how generative AI can be applied to build, hugely impactful entrepreneurial ventures. And one of the finalists, was looking at how to use generative AI for the purposes of drug discovery. What is a very lengthy, investment-heavy process. To think about the ways in which we can do drug discovery in a more accelerated time frame, and the positive impact that can have on the whole world around us as it relates to human health. That, to me, is extremely interesting. And my hope again is that we'll just see more and more of that to come. And we're going to see it everywhere. We're going to see it everywhere as new businesses emerge.
That's great. Now, just thinking as you were describing that, a lot of people are equally concerned about the threats as well as the opportunities that some of these new tools might create. Your own startup, OceanWorks, is very much in a responsible kind of area, really sort of clean tech and so forth. But how do you think about what's the responsibility that entrepreneurs have as they're thinking about these new opportunities to also not only be chasing after kind of what's technologically possible, but also thinking about, you mentioned impact, about what kinds of impacts you have and how to think about that from a sort of responsible standpoint?
Yeah, it's a great question, and something that requires entrepreneurs to do what sometimes we're not quite as good at, right? We're just, we're thinking, all right, how do we move as quickly as possible? And I believe in many cases, this requires that we take a step back. We take a step back and we consider what are the implications for the technology that we are employing to have an impact, because that impact can turn negative quite quickly, right? So taking a step back and instead of going full force, full steam ahead, considering, is this a positive impact? Is this a positive impact in the world around us, or does this have the potential to do something that is negative? So I think entrepreneurs have great opportunity in front of them, but they also have potential challenges that they might not already be aware of. And so it really does take careful consideration and rigorous analysis to make sure that they're employing it for good.
Thank you. And I'm sure we'll be talking more about that as well. But while I'm just looking through the other questions that are coming in, I think a lot of your work and a lot of the teaching in the Entrepreneurship Center at MIT really emphasizes the need for customer centricity, for understanding customers' needs. What problem can you solve for customers, and how do you create and capture the value around that? So what can you share from your experience and from all of the ventures that you've helped to mentor now about approaches that are most effective for helping to identify and prioritize customer needs and customer segments? What should people know about that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one of those things that you can do and you can do right, and doing it right, investing the time in understanding those customers, that's something that can totally change the trajectory of a business. So Peter, I think this is a great question. And I'd say there's a little bit of two parts. One part is about market segmentation, and one part's about really understanding the needs and the pain points of customers. Market segmentation, something like I said, like you can employ generative AI to do that. That could be a really powerful way to go and segment your market and find that focus early on. We always say, look, and especially myself as a software engineer, we'll build some technology. Who's the potential user? There could be tons of potential users for this a basic technology. And so, if we're to look at that, how do we make sure that we actually get it in the hands of a group? And perhaps we can come back to this topic, but we can segment the market by looking at different industries. We can look at it in terms of different end users, their potential uses, some of the complementary products that they might need, the size of the market. We can evaluate, our new idea in a variety of different market segments to figure out where do we find focus. And if we're able to do that, we'll build a product that serves one individual group of end users, and that will be really, really powerful. That will be our beachhead. That will be our gateway to the additional market segments that we can go after to expand our business, to go and solve a large, large problem. But finding that focus early on is just so important. When we think about that, one example, right? If we're going to go and serve the education market, that's super high level. And one of the things that I work with a lot of entrepreneurs to look at is, okay, how do we break that down? How do we go deeper? How do we find real focus and specificity? And we could say the education market, but that compared to fintech or healthcare, how do we break education down? We might think about the different types of education. Are we talking about formal education, informal education? With informal education, are we talking about K-12? Are we talking about undergraduate, graduate? Are we talking about public versus private educational institutions? Again, who are we talking about in terms of end users within those organizations? Are we talking about teachers? Are we talking about guidance counselors? Are we talking about administrators, staff? There's a variety of different segments that we can look at here. And the need starts with finding focus in those list of market segments. In terms of really becoming a customer-centric organization, Peter, that all comes back to our ability to get to know the end users in that market segment that we've defined. I always say, as well as we know some of our best friends. If you truly understand your customers and their demographics and their psychographics, you're going to have an ability to make decisions on the fly about what would be best for them, who we're really building our business for. And the thing that I've seen in building my businesses is that the better we get to know our end users, the better kind of historical data set we build as entrepreneurs. Now, historical data set, if we're a large organization, we've got a lot of data about our customers, what they want, how they want to receive value, and we can make decisions based on that institutional knowledge and the historical data set. But as entrepreneurs, we're starting from the ground up. We don't necessarily have all of that. And so we have to build up that data set for ourselves by getting to know our customers through this process of what we call primary market research. Primary market research, it's something, you could go out and talk to a bunch of people or run a survey. But there's a structured, rigorous approach to conducting primary market research to get as much information as possible about our customers, our end users in that target market, so that we can build products that will serve their needs, that they will buy in the process that they prefer at a price point that makes sense for them. And that's where this all starts. It's, the first question that we look at in discipline entrepreneurship, in our courses, in our programs, is this question: who is the customer? And sometimes it seems so obvious, and yet we don't have enough specificity. So primary market research is something we talk about as a process that we can do rigorously, but that we have to start from a qualitative perspective, not going out and running some big survey. Rather, instead, going and talking to individuals, interviewing them. And it's not just interviewing. We look at a variety of different approaches to primary market research, qualitative primary market research, that we have to bucket together. We don't want to just interview people, because sometimes what people say is not how they will act when they're put in the situation that we imagine them in. How they say they will act versus how they act are sometimes two different things. So our inquiry-based approach to primary market research says, let's do some interviews. Let's do some observation. Let's do some immersion. Going and doing the things ourselves as if we were the end user, so that we have as many data points as possible in our newfound historical data set as entrepreneurs. And so these are the actions that early entrepreneurs in the journey should be taking to get to know their customers. That's going to allow them to make the best decisions on the fly as they're building the business and applying that business plan out in the real world. So it comes back to starting with that market segment, Peter, finding that really specific market segment that is the beachhead market, and running the primary market research process to get to know these customers extremely well.
Great. You mentioned at the end of that something about making decisions.
Yeah.
The question is, how do people know that they're making, if not the right, at least, maybe even if not the best, at least good decisions? Yeah, we all are pretty familiar, but maybe you could reprise them for us with sort of the typical financial metrics that oftentimes people think about. But is there a broader set of ways of thinking about and measuring impact and success? And in fact, Lee Alvarado Benson in the thread asks, are we attempting to use generative AI? There that is again, to create different kinds of impact metrics.
Oh, great question. Great question. Yeah. And, we can certainly look at the financial metrics. Absolutely. Right. And those are going to apply across the board. Anybody can look at them. But one of the things that in what we call startup tactics, we look at, it's literally the first tactic is setting goals and looking at the metrics for what we are looking to achieve. And these are not always impact metrics, but impact metrics should be included within. If we're thinking about the future vision state that we have of the world as entrepreneurs, we have to break that down. We can't go from zero to future vision state of the world overnight. It's going to be a long process to get there. And so what we always encourage entrepreneurs to do is to build in structure for themselves. In a large organization, structure is often handed to you, right? You're given goals and metrics for the organization that you are working towards. Now, if we're to think about a new organization, there's no structure, there's no metrics. And so we as entrepreneurs have to build that ourselves. We have to build the structure, and that starts with the future vision state. But then it looks, okay, if we want to work towards that, what do we need to accomplish? What are our objectives in the next 30, 60, 90 days, year, whatever that might be? We break it down into smaller chunks. And for each of the things that we want to achieve, we have to know what the indicators are that we've done that we've hit that. And for each of those, you look at your team and you've got to figure out who's responsible for each element of these overall objectives. And we have to track our progress towards them. And that's where the metrics come in. For each of our goals and objectives, we should have metrics that attach, that give us that indication of whether or not we've achieved what we set out to. That allows us as a team to reevaluate at any point in the process to say, we're not hitting this objective or this metric. We need to revise, or we need to be doing something differently. And baked into those objectives and those metrics should be the impact metrics. And I don't want to say that there's one impact metric that we should all be going towards. I think that's going to be different on a case-by-case basis for each new entrepreneurial venture, whether that's a new startup or within an existing organization. A theme that seems to keep coming up. New startup or existing organization. And I think, one thing I want to make sure that we emphasize here, Peter, is entrepreneurship is about more than startups. It's, and we see this in all of our courses and programs. Entrepreneurship is something that exists in every organization. We're all entrepreneurs in some sense, right? It's about doing more than is reasonable with the resources that we have control of. And these structured goals are what help us to do that. And it all does tie to these metrics. But I also, remind people that with the two most precious resources that entrepreneurs have, time and money, whenever we have more time or more money, or less time or less money, right? Whether we just raised a big round of funding, or we just hired some new people onto the team and we've got some more time, or perhaps, the team's downsized and we don't have as much time. We have to reevaluate those goals, and those metrics that we're working towards need to change. Can we use generative AI to figure out what some of those metrics might be? Absolutely. Right. One of the most interesting things is you can go in and literally say, we're a new business. We're working in the sustainability space, and we're trying to think about what the right impact metrics would be for our business. And it will give you ideas. Does that mean that those are the exact right metrics for you and your business? Not necessarily, but it's a starting point. It's a first draft of what your metrics might be. And you can continue to poke and prod and not just ask of generative AI, what should our impact metrics be? But you can take those first draft impact metrics and you can socialize them with your team, with advisors, with other entrepreneurs, with investors, whoever it might be, to figure out what are the right impact metrics for you. I don't think we'll find all the right answers, but we'll get a starting point so that we can ultimately wind up landing with the right metrics.
As you're thinking about all of those ideas when you're advising companies, one of the questions that often comes to the forefront is about scaling. Should you be looking to quickly grow globally, for example, and should you be really trying to build a customer base even before you've necessarily perfected your product or your offering? Do you have an overriding philosophy around those questions?
Yes, I do. And I think this is something that you see quite often, and that we see in the venture capital market right now. Less general desire to invest in growth or blitz scaling and that sort of thing, right? My general philosophy is that we should have that plan of where we start our beachhead market and where we are to go, leveraging the existing assets that we've built in entering that beachhead market. We should have a structured plan of what is the next market we will go into, what's the market after that, and a general guide towards our vision. But we don't want to just overinvest in growth. We don't want to just go to a new country. We want to leverage what we've already done. If we have customers in one segment in one country, we might want to look at just the next adjacent market, right? Instead of saying, oh my gosh, we've got a new idea for a new product and we've got all these new customers we can go after. While that might sound appealing in terms of business growth, it doesn't necessarily leverage the assets that we already have. And so that's the thing that I always caution entrepreneurs on. We don't want to grow just to grow. We should know why we're doing it. What is our goal? It does kind of come back to those metrics, Peter, that we were just talking about. And so having a structured approach to doing that and not jumping too far, not taking two steps, instead looking at what's the next step in front of us. That's what I really emphasize.
In fact, Joachim Thorson just asked a sort of a follow-up question to that, I think, which is, what's your advice to companies and entrepreneurs when you're advising them about how important having a fixed North Star metric or OKR is right from the outset?
Yeah, another great question, and something that we explore in our courses and programs extensively. One of the things about any new entrepreneurial venture is that things are constantly changing. It's a very, very iterative process. So yes, while I do think, we should have OKRs or whatever goal setting method is right for, the specific organization, you have to consider first, what is the time horizon? What is the time horizon for these goals and for these metrics that we're looking at? The goals will change based on what you learn from customers, doing that primary market research, Peter, that we were talking about. And so if we look at it, right, it's not going to be just one metric. We're likely looking at a variety of metrics. And if we were to have a North Star metric, that would probably change. But if you set OKRs, for example, as one goal setting method or approach, we might say at first that we want to look at it over the course of, the next 2 weeks. Instead of what a larger organization might do, which is look at it over the course of perhaps a quarter or even a year. We're looking at it in shorter time horizons. That allows us to react to revise based on what we're learning and how the business is changing, in that current moment. So I think it's really important to not set time horizons that are too long with these goals and to be ready to revise them. And, we set a goal and we think that's what's right, but to also be okay amongst the team that, maybe this was not the right goal to set, and we need to revise it right here, right now, instead of just going with it because that's what we had initially set. It requires flexibility, I think, is the biggest thing. And how do you know if you're on track? Well, the research shows that those teams that set goals and objectives and who host regular meetings together to look at their progress towards those goals are the ones that are most effective at building a business. And so I think the key is to aligning as a team who owns what, and then checking in with each other on a regular basis to make sure that we are on track. And if not, we need to revise. We either need to revise those goals or we need to look at what are we doing on a daily basis that's taking away from our ability to hit those goals. This kind of comes back to our daily to-do list as entrepreneurs. Are there things on the to-do list that don't contribute towards those goals? And if so, maybe we should cross them off the to-do list and skip them altogether. Because we're entrepreneurs, we're on a mission, and we need to be extremely disciplined about how we invest our time, given that it is one of our most precious resources, like we talked about earlier, Peter.
Thank you. And I'm just reading through, and please, everyone, keep the questions coming. There are some great ones coming in. Colleen Becker as asking a related question, I think. One of the key metrics presumably should be sales. If we want to have a business, we need to identify and connect with customers. And so Colleen is asking, have you got any suggestions for effective processes for early stage startups to find these potential customers, particularly in a very technology forward kind of emerging technology field like generative AI, where people might not understand what the nature of either the opportunity or the threat to their business is. So what have you seen work best for people at that early stage to find customers?
Great question, Colleen. And, this is something that we do. We look at in depth, in detail in our courses. And I think, in large part, it starts with what we call the watering hole or watering holes. And we do talk extensively about what are virtual watering holes. Where can we find a group, a homogenous group of our potential customers, our end users in that target beachhead market? And in those watering holes, you can find all the people who are potential customers. And if you're looking for those who might be open to emerging technologies, you might identify those individuals who are asking questions about this, and one watering hole, not a virtual watering hole, but, let's say a trade association, a conference, right? You can look at who's going to which sessions focused on emerging technologies. And right there, potentially in the room, you have all those individuals who might be more open to these emerging technologies as it might support their business. And if you can identify those individuals, you're in a great place. But what I would also say is you're going to learn a lot from the people who are open to the emerging technologies and the people who are not necessarily thinking about the emerging technologies. And so in those watering holes, if you can find people who match the characteristics of your target end user, they're going to be great to conduct primary market research with as well. And many of the folks you conduct primary market research with can turn into your first customers. And so, that's the thing that I would really recommend. It's first identifying that virtual watering hole, going and making one-on-one connections within the virtual or in-person watering hole, and ultimately seeing where that leads you. Even if they don't become customers, you will be able to extract insights from your conversations with them. And that's one of the things that I think will be most important, regardless of whether they are explicitly interested in these emerging technologies. And for closing deals, I feel like this could be a whole LinkedIn Live in and of itself, and certainly something that we talk about in our courses and in our programs. The number one thing that I would come back to, as is thematic with this conversation, Peter, is to close deals, we've got to find those individuals who are most similar, who most match our target end user, who can extract value from our proposition. And if we find those individuals and we can truly create value for them, closing deals should be simpler, right? It's not trying to convince somebody to use a product and to get the value we think they want if it's not actually going to help them. So, that's like the highest level of, closing deals. But in a new entrepreneurial venture, that is so important. Not trying to sell something to somebody who doesn't necessarily need it.
So this is clearly a crucial skill set for yourself as a founder, as an entrepreneur, and to have on the team. Tom Moorhead, if we can find that question, was asking a little earlier, what other key skills or capabilities do you think are vital to have yourself as a founder, or to make sure that you recruit early to your team as you're building out your own venture?
Yeah, this is interesting. Thanks, Tom. Thanks for the question. And, I think this is something that, we do look at. If we're thinking about the team and the skill sets that we need on this team, part of it is, the ability to build structure for people who are coming into a new organization that does not yet have structure. But when we look at the goals and we look at what skills do we need to bring onto the team, we have to look at the goals or the objectives that we're trying to hit that we don't necessarily have the skill set to be able to do. And so part of this comes back to looking at the gaps, right? What are the gaps we have on our team and how do we fill those? What are the skill sets that we need to be able to hit the objective? The other thing I would say is when we talk about hiring an early team, we oftentimes look for individuals who have a specialty, but who can also operate as generalists, right? For example, myself, my specialty, I would say, is engineering, software engineering, but my ability to run some of the marketing, to do some of the IT, to do some of the sales ops, to do some of the HR when need be, right? The ability to work across any functional area is super important, and something that, I explore in depth in my new book. One of the things that I have is everybody talks about founder-led sales, and coming back to the question, founders should be able to sell. I think they need to be able to sell because they're always selling. That is their number one job, whether it's to a new recruit to come onto the team, to an investor, or to our customers. But one of the things that I think about a lot is in the early days of any new entrepreneurial venture, startup or in an existing organization, we can't just do the sales. It founder-led sales, absolutely, but I believe it's founder-led everything. What do I mean by that? In the early stages of a business, we've got a small team. We're not going to be able to have one person designated as our recruiter. We're not going to be able to have one person designated as our accountant. The founding team needs to be able to have these generalist skill sets to be able to pick up any of that. And so we think about founder-led everything, and the fact that each functional role has a different hat. Peter, I think I'm going to get a hat that has a bunch of hats that have all the different functional roles on them. They're all going to be in different colors. We'll bring them into EDP or one of the programs. And I believe that entrepreneurs need to be able to wear all these hats at once. Picture that. 15 hats on my head. We'll see if we can pull that together. But the need to be able to do that, and to do that just enough, right? We don't have to be expert recruiters as an entrepreneur, but we have to be able to do just enough in recruiting to be able to find those people to bring onto our team. So that's really what it comes back to, is this ability to switch between functional roles and be just good enough at them to be able to figure it out and to get it done until the point where the venture has enough traction to be able to acquire additional money or additional time, like raising money to pay individuals to fill those seats. So, that's the challenge of starting a new business. We have so much to do, but the ability to learn these different skill sets is just so important.
You mentioned there your forthcoming book, Disciplined Entrepreneurship Startup Tactics, I think is the title.
That's it.
What else should people be looking forward to in that book? I'm sure there are some not only groundbreaking but transformational ideas in that. So if your publisher will let you, can you share some preview insights into what we should be looking forward to in that book?
Oh, most certainly. So both Disciplined Entrepreneurship, the revised and updated edition, and Disciplined Entrepreneurship Startup Tactics come out April 2nd. Mark your calendar. Peter, it's going to be great. And we're really excited about it, because one of the things that I've noticed, and it does kind of come together with my tactics course, is my belief is that we've kind of left entrepreneurs hanging in some regard. Entrepreneurship education is very strong in business planning. I've got an idea or a technology or a problem that I want to solve. And we can teach people how to turn that into a business plan. But if we've got a business plan, that alone is not enough, right? We need to be able to turn that into a business. So learning all of those different functional skills is a necessity. And there's a way to do that in order of operations, if you will, that can optimize for success. The thing, Peter, in all of our courses, all of our programs that we're focused on is educating entrepreneurs to increase their odds of success. And I feel like we've talked about this before, Peter, right? Entrepreneurship, the risk involved, we can increase the odds of success by taking a rigorous, structured, disciplined approach to building a new business. And so Startup Tactics looks at each of those functional roles in the order of operations in which we should do them to build our new business. It builds on those first principles of disciplined entrepreneurship. And what it does is it goes through 4 stages. So we look first at setting the foundations, and that's it looks at goal setting, it looks at metrics and KPIs, and the systems that we should use to build a new business to track our progress. So that comes back to one of the questions that we had here in the chat. The second stage is market testing. This looks at things like primary market research, Peter, which we talked about earlier. It looks at a really rigorous data-informed approach to do that. It looks at building startup assets or collateral, right? Building the assets that we need to go put our business out to the world in our market testing. And then it looks at some early marketing and sales tactics that we can employ to extremely efficiently, from a capital and time perspective, go and put our value prop out in the world and test it. And lastly, the sales, right? Go and actually start selling to people, right? It's like, how do you close deals? Well, that's what we look at in the book and in the course. And then the third is product development. I said, come back with customers and then we'll build the product. Let's not build the product and overinvest there until we know that we've got a line of people waiting down the street to use it. And then we go into product design, user testing, and we do look at actually doing some of the early engineering, right? Or at least the ability to communicate as to how that engineering will happen. And once we have product, we come back with customers, we come back with product, then we're on to the 4th stage. And that stage is resource acquisition. This looks at things like legal, how to incorporate the different legal documentation that we'll need. It looks at finance, building a financial plan, building the pitch deck, all before we go out and we fundraise and we start hiring. And that is the resource acquisition, fundraising for more money and hiring for more time. And that's what the book covers. It covers it in detail and comes with tons of additional materials like worksheets and workbooks that can help entrepreneurs not just learn and gain the knowledge, but actually go and do and put this into practice and build their business, take that business plan into a successful venture, that can be their career. We can go out and create our own careers, which is just so amazing.
That sounds fantastic. I'm sure we're all looking forward to getting our hands on a copy in April. You talked a few times there about not only what's in the book, but how that's all already based on things that you've been teaching in your vast array of courses here at MIT. Some of those are in our domain in executive education. There's the entrepreneurship development program. There's the disciplined entrepreneurship program. The first of those is an on-campus, really intensive experience. I see we have a URL on the screen that people could look at that. Disciplined entrepreneurship, thanks to COVID, we started offering that as a live online Zoom format that has been incredibly popular and successful as well. But could you share with people who are watching a little bit about what is the kind of experience that you and the Trust Center team create for learners in these different formats of programs? What can they expect, and what do they get out of it? Do you think most valuable, most important, has most impact for them as individuals?
Oh, absolutely, Peter. These courses, these programs, they are fast-paced, high energy, and they really allow anybody to kind of step into the life of entrepreneurship. Whether you're an existing entrepreneur, whether you want to be an entrepreneur, whether you work in a large organization, it allows you to kind of step back and dive into the most rigorous, structured process to starting new entrepreneurial ventures. So, in our different formats, we do that both online, in person, here in Cambridge at MIT. These programs, they will take you through this disciplined entrepreneurship framework. They'll take you through it both through cases and examples, but we also put you in the driver's seat. In EDP, which is an extremely fast-paced, high-intensity program, 1 week long, you start on Sunday evening with generally maybe no idea, maybe no team, maybe you're coming in with an idea already. And by the end of the week on Friday, you have a comprehensive business plan, and one that's been battle tested. We've put you through a number of coaching and mentoring sessions outside of the daily lectures to help you gain the knowledge. We put you in with entrepreneurs, with alums of the program, with folks who've been there, who've done that, including our wonderful team here at the Martin Trust Center for MIT Entrepreneurship. So it's never a dull moment in DEP or EDP. There's always a lot happening. And, Peter, you asked about, what participants get out of it. I would say absolutely. You gain the knowledge, right? You gain knowledge of this most structured process to go and build a new business. You also gain the network. This is one of the most powerful things, and we see this in every cohort of these programs. The network of individuals who come together, they learn that we call it the common operating system, the common language. You learn that, and you have people who you can always go back to when you're starting a business in the future. These networks, this community of EDP and DEP alum, it's incredibly strong. And I still remember folks going back to that group of individuals when they were conducting market research for a business they were building years later. So it's not just the knowledge, but it's also the community. And in some cases, businesses even spin out of these programs, which is very exciting for us to see. But one of the things, Peter, that you said to me during our last program was that it's incredible to watch participants who come into these programs and then go right back out into the real world, because they're with us for such a short period of time, and yet they're able to gain so much and apply it immediately. The ability to apply it immediately is what's so interesting. And I just think of that as being one of the best perks of the program is you can take it right into your business. And I was just emailing with one of the former participants, and they're out there taking what they learned and dropping it right into the new entrepreneurial venture that they're starting. And it's the same is true both with the entrepreneur building the new business from the ground up, and there was a group of folks doing it within a large organization, and they're able to take all this back with them.
That's very helpful. Thank you for describing that. This is one of the challenges I think if people have been asking about in various ways in the thread is that, it goes back to the question of if you've got essentially an experiential product, how do you give customers or potential customers the access to that experience to understand how you could be creating value for them? And Courtney shared with me, Windsor Cho has asked, how do you connect the dots on innovations when all the pieces don't come together in a sort of a predictable or controlled time frame? So I guess this really relates to tech entrepreneurship and maybe your own personal experience in that space as well.
Oh, most certainly. And that's a great question. And it's something that, reminds me of a student who I had a number of years ago. He learned the process with us. And then he came back and he said, I've been doing all this research. I've got a new business I want to build. I'm going to apply the process that I learned from you all to build this business. And, when all of the pieces haven't yet come together, which is certainly the case for him, he's looking at a very long time horizon because it's hard tech. For him, it's a matter of organizing the pieces in an iterative fashion in the plan, because so much is yet to happen. But in the meantime, to make sure that the core value proposition does truly resonate with the end user. So while we might not have the entire product or solution built just yet, that's okay. Instead, what we can do is we can take that value prop and socialize that. That can be done through primary market research, more advanced forms of primary market research, but it can also be done with one of the things we talk about in tactics, and Peter, which we actually first developed through some of our sessions within larger programs, such as EDP, which is the mousetrap model. The mousetrap model that we explore in all of our programs, DEP and EDP, looking at how do we test this value prop with the real world? How do we collect real world data that the people who we believe want something really want it? Which that's the data we need to build the conviction to say, yes, we're going to move forward with this. We are going to keep trying to put those pieces of the innovation together. Because if we don't have something that people want, nobody's ever going to pay us for it. And so we have to validate that upfront as we continue putting the different pieces that may not be controlled or within our control together to build this entrepreneurial venture. So I think that's a great question. And, some of it is just making sure that we're incorporating the pieces as they come together into the larger vision, into the larger plan.
Umar Latif asked something which I think would be a great follow-on to that. How long would it or should it typically take in sort of elapsed time to get to that point where you've actually got customers and a product or service that is mature enough to have it out in the market? And if I could add to that, actually, we often talk about in the case of serial entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs learning that skill set, that set of capabilities, that not every venture, at least in its first iteration, will be that wild success that you would hope it to be. Many people, the word used to be pivot. I don't know if there's new vocabulary these days, but they iterate their venture. But there's also a question of, how long is too long? When should you sort of recognize that it's time to call that one quits and move on to the next opportunity?
Yeah, absolutely. Great questions. And, how long should it take you to have your target end user and your target market and to have a product out in that market and feel confident that you've nailed it? We always say nail it and then scale it to the adjacent markets. How long should it take? It really does depend on the business, right? I think it's too hard to give one general answer to that, because you might be talking about building, a small piece of software that you should be able to do, hopefully within a couple of years. Now, if you're talking about deep tech, hard tech, life sciences, these businesses where the time horizon is much longer to get into market, you could be talking about 7 to 10 years. So it does depend on the type of business, and I wouldn't generalize that. Yes, Peter, entrepreneurs still pivot. It's absolutely still very much so a thing, and we need to be pivoting, small pivots and sometimes bigger pivots. Many entrepreneurs who I've worked with, they've gone out, they've built a business, and they said, look, we're going to pivot because it's not, the business is not performing in the exact way we were looking for. So we're going to kind of uproot it and start over. And that can sometimes be a necessity. How long until you say, we've got to call it, or we've got to make a more serious pivot? It's hard to say. It's hard to say because sometimes you have those indicators that there is traction coming, but there does come a point in time where it's not expanding to the extent that you want to, and that's where you've got to have the right group of advisors, mentors, coaches, whoever it might be around you, or potentially the board, to say, X business is in a position where this is not growing, this is not going the direction we need it to, and sometimes entrepreneurs need that critical feedback. It's feedback that's going to help the entrepreneur make the right decision. And when you're in the weeds building the business, sometimes it's not as easy. And so, even in the course of EDP, Peter, over the course of that 1 week, people are making pivots all week long, sometimes on a nightly basis. And in many cases, it's Sunday night. It's been 2 hours and they've already pivoted, and that's okay. That's a good thing. I'd say, if we come back to the original question, how do you know if you've nailed it, and what's the time frame for that? You should have a group of really committed customers who all have similar characteristics. You can serve them all with the same product. They're all going to buy it in the same way, and they're talking about it with each other. Other people are showing up to buy your product who you've never had an interaction with, who you've never marketed directly to, because they're hearing about it from this group of existing customers who are all similar and they talk to each other. So that's really one of the indicators to determine that we've nailed it.
What very interesting by that last point, one of the things that kills so many, not only startups, but businesses and changes over time is the cost of customer acquisition. When you go out and earn those customers. Could you say a bit about, do you have any good salutary stories, or more importantly, advice to people? How do they think about the cost of customer acquisition and what they can do to manage it?
Ooh, yes, this is a great question, and again, a topic we could spend a whole LinkedIn Live talking about. It's an interesting one because, cost of customer acquisition by definition should, over the course of time, go down. As you build the business, you build efficiencies, you learn more about your customers, and you're able to optimize everything that is sales and marketing within your organization. And we look at how exactly to calculate this in the courses. The thing is how do we optimize it, and what are we comfortable with upfront for a cost of customer acquisition? It's going to be higher probably than we're comfortable with in the early days. One of the things, and this comes back to that mousetrap model, is we might need to spend a little bit more to find such narrow targeting at that initial group of end users, and that's okay. But cost of customer acquisition generally is going up. At a macro level, it's becoming more costly to reach the customers that we need to. And so with that in mind, we've got to get creative. We've got to think about how are we going to differentiate from the competition when products are, in many cases becoming commoditized. How are we going to level up our go-to-market strategy to get a cost of customer acquisition that makes this an interesting business? And, one of the things that I feel like is most often missed is, the cost of customer acquisition and the lifetime value might not look great upfront. And in many cases, it just won't when you're building a new venture. You want to have one that's really solid. But in the early days when you're learning, it's better to have some data rather than no data. But sometimes that initial data is not as appealing as you might want to see for a business that's a year further along in the life cycle. And so sharing that early data can sometimes be daunting. But what's important is that if we share that early cost of customer acquisition, lifetime value data, we also share our plan to get that to a really healthy ratio that indicates that this is a long-term viable and sustainable business from a financial perspective. And so our ability to say, here's where it is now, here's where we know we can get it, here are the experiments that we are going to run to get it there. That's the narrative that's so important when we look at the extremely early metrics for any new entrepreneurial venture. To get to a point where those metrics do give us as entrepreneurs, and of course everybody around us, the conviction to keep moving forward.
Thank you. Let me just scan to see if there's any more questions while we're, I think, starting to wrap up. So please, if you've got any burning question, now would be the time to ask it, because we'll be wrapping up soon. So please do. I think we have a note here on the screen. If you've still got a question for Paul, now is the time to ask it. But in the meantime, Paul, perhaps you could, you've mentioned a few times sort of the potential contrast or similarities between entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship in the startup space versus entrepreneurial behaviors in established organizations. What are the main similarities and differences? And maybe look at that through the lens of the people that you see coming into programs like EDP and disciplined entrepreneurship.
Yeah, it's such a good question. And like I said, entrepreneurship is more than just startups. We need entrepreneurs everywhere. We need them in large corporate organizations. We need them in academia and nonprofits and all these different places. It is different though, right? And we teach a process that can be applied within a new organization or an existing organization. The process, in many cases, is the same, but sometimes the challenges or constraints are different, right? For any new organization, we don't necessarily have funding to start, right? We don't have existing customers. We have those as assets within a larger organization, but sometimes there are things that slow us down within a larger organization. The thing that I would say is that many of the companies that we know and love today, Peter, many of those companies likely will not exist in the same form as we know them in 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 years from now. Things will happen. And we were just talking with a group last night about this here in Cambridge. The businesses might not be here in 100 years as they exist today, but that's what necessitates entrepreneurship within. Entrepreneurship to look at how do we change this organization? Where should we be innovating within to make sure that even if it doesn't look the same in 100 years, it still exists. And we have tons of examples that we look at there. And for most organizations, the number one thing that needs to exist within for entrepreneurship to be successful is culture. The culture that allows for some level of failure or experimentation, I would say, right? The notion that within a larger organization, you can go and try something and, if it doesn't work, you're not going to be penalized. You're still going to have a job, right? That you can be entrepreneurial within that organization, working on a new project or working on a new value prop or targeting a new customer segment, and be successful in doing so. But at the end of the day, assuming that culture exists, with all the constraints and assets in mind, the process remains largely the same, starting with the question of who is the customer, what are our goals, and how do we achieve that future vision state for this organization. Being an entrepreneur within an existing organization can be frustrating, but being an entrepreneur in general can be frustrating. It's about having that spirit as well, the spirit to keep moving forward when sometimes we're not looking at the most obvious answer, but we're thinking about the long game within an existing organization. It's so important.
Thank you. And as I asked, and we got some questions, let me put them to you. But maybe we can do a closing quickfire round. Just keep
Let's do it.
On the clock. And so, following on from the last point that you made, Arvind Mishra asks about the core team and developing trust. You mentioned that in the context also, I think, of large organizations. So, what's your quickfire answer for how do you evaluate the people that you're considering to engage in your business, whether it's inside a large company or a startup?
Yeah, absolutely. We always say the idea is the most overrated part of any new entrepreneurial venture. It's the team that is the most important. How do you evaluate the team? Well, you've got to work on, we say try before you buy. You got to work on some projects together and get into the weeds together and see how each individual on the team and the team as a whole performs when, faced with some sort of a setback. When some of the primary market research reveals that the initial plan won't work, we have to see how that team continues to operate and does it remain a high-performing team? That's the thing I would say. We've got to try out these co-founder relationships and we've got to go through the process. That will give us a lot of indications of whether this is the right team to move forward with.
Excellent advice. Maximiliano Prano asks, how do you know when to pull the cord? And he means in particular when it's enough for investment.
When it's enough for investment.
So when is your venture ready to be seeking investors?
Oh, great question. And, one of the most common questions I get is, we need to go raise money. How should we do it? And the response I always give is, well, what traction do you have right now to warrant somebody investing in the business? So, when is it ready? You could say at any point in time, but my recommendation is to always build as much traction as possible before you go out to fundraise, because that's going to make sure that you get the best deal as an entrepreneur as well. It's going to make your process as easy as possible, meaning you invest less time in fundraising, you invest more time in building your business. Yeah.
That's great. Andrew Silverman, what step in the customer discovery phase would you like to take less time and effort? So where's the biggest process improvement opportunity in your book?
Oh my gosh. Well, in the customer discovery phase, while I would love for primary market research, specifically interviews, to take less time, There is so much value to be extracted from them. And those are the unique insights that set any new business apart from all of those businesses that can go get market data. While I wish it was more efficient, and in some ways it can be, running a series of interviews, setting them up, finding the people, setting them up, actually conducting the interviews, and then doing the analysis of the notes and the conversation that happened to feed into a larger set of insights. It takes a long time. It's well worth it. Do I wish it were faster? Yes, I absolutely do.
Thank you. And this is probably the last question we have time for, and I think it's a great one. Konstantin Roussos, let me paraphrase, is saying, well, this is lots of great discussion about offense. What about defense? How do you determine whether you've actually got a defensible position? He puts it as a strong moat. And how do you sustain that competitive differentiation?
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And, we always say you can't spend too much time watching the competitors, because then you're not spending enough time focused on building your business. But how do you evaluate your moat? Well, you've got to look at it and figure out, is this something that the competitors are doing? Is this something that they're taking advantage of? How are they progressing? How are they growing? So we do need to look outward just a little bit, while also making sure that we're moving forward as a business. But we always do come back to the core. The core is, your moat that exists for the long term. We say it's unique, it's important, and it grows over time. And that's the one to really focus on, because that's going to be the thing that, in time, a moat might dry up, for example. But the core is something that exists forever. So making sure to find focus there is extremely important. And that's the process we look at.
Paul, I'm so sad that we're just about out of time at the top of the hour. Thank you so much for this high-paced and incredibly informative session that we've just spent together. On behalf of all of the people that have been watching and will watch, and the fantastic answers that you gave to so many of those questions, it's really a thrill to get to do this with you. And maybe just one last quick reminder, if people can't wait for the book, one of the upcoming opportunities to see you in action in EDP and DEP.
Oh, absolutely. More to come, and sneak peeks of what's to come in the book in those programs. We'd love to see you there. And Peter, thank you to you. Thanks for hosting today.
Thank you again. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.